Hello everyone, welcome. In this video, we are going to be looking at price determination. The prices of goods and services in the market, how are they determined? Now, we are going to look at two ways in which prices can be determined in the market. The first way price can be determined in the market, we can relate that to demand and supply. And then the second way, we can relate the second way to what we call um, price control. Okay, so in this video, we are working with the first one, which has to do with demand and supply. Basically, we know what a market is. For a start, a market is an arrangement, all right, that brings buyers and sellers together into close contact, okay, with the aim of exchanging goods and services. Now, typically, what we find in every market is just like every human being, we equally have what we call a skeleton. So every market also has a skeleton. The moment you walk into a market, you see a skeleton in the market. So the skeleton of the market is actually made up of two components known as the demand and the supply. Okay, so the demand has to do with what people are buying. Okay, so what people are buying is what we call the demand, and then what businesses are selling is what we call the supply. Okay, so we are going to find these two components in every market. Okay, so before now, we actually did something, or we must have seen something called the demand curve. And then the demand curve, like we said, the demand curve slopes downwards from left to right. So if we label this price and label this quantity, and we have this zero, if we draw the demand curve will slope from left to right. So this is the demand curve sloping downward from left to right, telling us that at a higher price, consumers will buy less of a product, and then at a lower price, consumers will buy more of that same product. So this is how for a normal product, okay, this is how a consumer would typically behave. So let's take this one off because we are looking at the price um, determination. So if this is the demand curve for a particular product, let's say this is demand for rice. Okay, so if this is the demand for rice, now how are we going to get the price for this? Now, the first thing we have to note is that you cannot have a price except there is a demand. You can't have a price in the market except you have what? Demand for a product and also the supply for a product in the same market. So we have to draw also the supply curve. Now, the supply curve slopes upward from left to right. So this we have the supply also for rice. So now we have the demand curve and the supply curve in one particular diagram. So this is what we call the point where demand and supply curve intersect is what we call the equilibrium position, okay, or the equilibrium point. So this is where QS is equal to QD. So at the equilibrium, something happens. We have a definite price, or we have a single price, all right, and we have a single quantity. Now, this quantity is known as what? QE, which is equilibrium quantity. Notice we call this QE because it is the same quantity for demand and also the same quantity for supply at this price. So the equilibrium price is the price at which demand equates supply, and then the equilibrium quantity is similar, the quantity at which demand is equal to supply. So since we already have the uh, equilibrium position, so let's call this the price E, and then this is the QE. So now we have the equilibrium position. So now let's start to think a little bit what happens in this market. So let's assume that the market is beginning at a very high position here. So let me use this other marker. So the market is beginning from here at a very high price. So we are going to have an amount for supply. If I trace this down, we have an amount for supply here. We call this QS. And if I trace this down, we have an amount for demand. We call it QD. Now, if you notice what has happened here, when the price of the product is high, this is P1. When the price of the product is high, let's just give it a value and say the price of the product in this case is 10 in pounds, or let's say 10 in the Nigerian naira. So we have 10 naira. Okay, so when we have 10 naira as price of a product, which is relatively a very high price in this market, so we have the demand for the product being very low. So let's say the demand for the product here is just 5 units. At that same price, the quantity supplied into that market is very high at, let's say, 20 units. So what we find is that we have a case of what? Excess into the market. We call this the excess supply. Okay, so here we have the excess supply because this amount supplied into the market is greater than the amount demanded in that same market for that same product of rice. So what happens here is we have what? Excess supply, what we typically know as what? Surplus. Now, when we have this surplus, anytime we have this surplus, okay, it indicates that the supply of a product is higher than the demand for that product. So we can see that above the equilibrium price, supply is usually higher than the demand. So depending on how high the price is, that will tell you how much excess you can have in this market. So above the equilibrium price, you have excess supply, which is surplus. So typically, what happens in every market where there is a surplus is that there will be a kind of pressure on the price because producers have supplied much more than is needed in the market, and they want to sell their product. They don't want to go back home with their product with them. So they want to give this product away. But the consumers are feeling, well, the products are too high or too expensive. We can no longer afford it. So what do you think the suppliers will do in this case, or the seller of rice will do in this case? They try now to bring down the price down. And then that is why the price of the product starts falling down from a very high price where the supply of that product is very high. The price is higher supply, or the surplus in the market now adds or puts a kind of pressure on the price, and then the price starts falling down. And eventually the price gets back to the equilibrium price. Okay, so let's reverse this same situation and see what happens here. Now, let's say the price has gone down and has gone down to the lowest of, let's say, 2 naira. Okay, so if the price has gone down to 2 naira, let's call this P2, somewhere here. So if the price has gone down to 2 naira, this is what we have. Okay, we have this. So if we trace the amount of demand, sorry, the amount of supply, we have 5 units, and then the amount of demand, let's say here, we have just roughly, let's say 18 units. So we can see that consumers want to buy this amount of goods at 2 naira, while producers are only willing to supply just this amount of goods at that same 2 naira. So we are having a kind of a shortage here, and this shortage is as a result of what? Excess of demand. So we have excess demand over supply. So the excess demand is something we also know as what? As shortage or shortages. So what do we find in a market like this, whereby the price of a product is very low? It creates what we call shortage in this market. Now the shortage that we have in this market will start on its own to push the price back up again. So when we have a price that is very low, lower than the equilibrium price, the natural thing that happens in that market is that the price of the product will start going up. So we can see that the excess demand or the shortage in this market has begun to push the price of the product back up to the equilibrium position. So the general thing to note from here is that at equilibrium price, okay, the quantity demanded and quantity supply are the same. However, when the price of the product is higher, even if it is a little bit higher than the equilibrium price, we are going to have an excess of that product in the market, supplied into the market. And because of that excess, okay, the price may start falling down until it gets back to the equilibrium. And then the reverse is true whenever we have a case of a fall in the price lower than the equilibrium price. So when the price has gone below the equilibrium price, we have the case of a shortage. So any market where you have a shortage, okay, the price of the product will start going up. This explains what happens basically in every market, okay? So in every market, you have a lot of people who wants to buy the product represented by the demand. We also have the people or firms who want to sell the product represented by the supply, and at equilibrium, they buy and sell at a given price, and they sell and buy the same quantity. So this is how prices are determined in the market. At equilibrium price, the demand for the product and the supply of the product are equal. At a price above the equilibrium price, okay, the supply is in excess of demand, and that pushes the price of the product down. And then at a lower price, lower than the equilibrium, we have an excess in this market, and the excess that we have in this market, excess demand rather, would create a shortage. This excess demand now pushes the price upward. So the pressure pushes the price upward. So the equilibrium price is that particular price, all right? The equilibrium price is that particular price in which there is no pressure on it for any reason. Demand and the supply is equal at the price of equilibrium, because at the price of equilibrium, there is no pressure to take the price up or take it down. Everyone is satisfied in this market. So here you go. This is how prices are determined in the market, okay, through the forces of demand and supply. In the next video, we are going to see how price control, or how the government can come into such a market and try to influence what happens to the price of goods and services in the market. Thank you so much. If you find this video helpful, please, you're already here, please hit on the like and subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video.